When looking at the first states, we are really only looking for two things: the ability to tax and use force at the margins to do so. Everything else stems from this power. Once you have tax revenue flowing in, the state then springs to life, so to speak. You can have people viewed as state officials whose decree is fiat law, but without tax revenue they have no incentive to perform their functions, and the state is in place but dormant. An example of a dormant state would be Pennsylvania, which was covered earlier. If an authority figure within society has the ability to issue decrees that are taken very seriously, but these decrees are not enforced at the margins, this is not a state, and this authority figure is simply competing on the free market against other authority figures. An example of this would be the Icelandic chieftains or the Irish brehons. And if his decrees fail to satisfy the mass of people, many will just stop listening to him, and if most still listen to him, some may choose to move away and find another intersubjective consensus. The way I see the state coming about is with a religious leader. As a religious leader, he receives donations and tithes for telling stories and performing ceremonies. He may even convince people that by giving him donations, they will earn a place in the afterlife or be reincarnated at a higher post. And so the priest has a significant ideological hold and some money coming in from the tithes. There are two ways I see a state forming from this. One, the priest hires what are initially bodyguards and then formalizes the tithe. The tithe then becomes mandatory to prevent excommunication, perhaps after some revelation on the part of the priest, or a revelation on the part of some patsy he set up, or the revelation of some genuinely crazy person. Some of the tithe is used for social services, and thus opposing the tithe becomes analogous to opposing social services, which increases intersubjective ideological support for the tithe itself, because it is connected to those social services. Similar to how people today, if you are said to be, if you oppose the state monopoly on police, people think that you oppose police. Eventually the priest, or perhaps his grandson, begins the practice of killing heretics, and then not paying the tithe becomes heresy. And this, of course, is the imposition of the marginal state, and the ideology is religion. And this would explain why the first states were theocracies. A second way I see the state coming about is that the priest makes a deal with some secular authority figure, and the priest then says to the masses, "Follow this king or you'll be excommunicated." And this secular ruler, this king, starts issuing taxes on the threat of excommunication from the priest, and then the king gives the priest a healthy kickback. This is the union of throne and altar. The secular leader, and then perhaps his grandson, follows a similar path from the first example, exacting taxes under the threat of excommunication, until, as in the previous example, banishing anyone who doesn't pay his taxes. And of course, if the banished person refuses to leave and fights to the death, then he would be killed. And so the marginal state has been created by this way. Banishment is enforced by the threat of killing if you don't leave. This would be the state justified by religion. And so these two accounts explain the existence of the two types of states that originated. One, the direct theocracy, and two, the secular state justified by religion. Later on, after generations living under states, populations simply assume the state is some inevitable law of nature, like death and taxes. And so the religious justification became less necessary over time, but also less tenable as more and more people became literate and able to read the various holy books, and also more sophisticated in general, and less likely to take the word of a self-proclaimed prophet or priest at face value. And if you are wondering how states are maintained today, which was a question I asked myself, just look in the mirror. Did you ever support the state? Did you ever think taxes were an unpleasant but necessary thing? Are there people in your life that act this way? Just look in the mirror. That is the ideological support that is the bedrock of the state.